Hello, you're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. Because it's more fun to believe. I think the intro music is still going. It's muted for some reason. Hey, everybody. Thank you for listening to another experience of Me and Paranormal You. This is your buddy, Ryan Singer. I am on location today. I am very excited to have a conversation with a newer friend of mine, Simon Brewer. I guess are we just professional storm chaser?
Yep. Good morning.
And good morning, indeed. It feels like a timely conversation because weather seems to be so paramount on people's minds nowadays. And specifically extreme weather seems to be grabbing more attention lately, just in general, I suppose, other than just hurricane season or flooding season, I guess, which kind of overlap with one another potentially, I guess. I'm not sure about that. But
they can, depending on what part of the country you live in.
Yeah, but we met, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, a little over a month ago. I don't know. I don't understand time.
Yeah, I think it was like a month ago.
But there was some really, really fascinating stories. And I really enjoy your perspective and your specifically the way I've been describing you to people when because you come up in just my daily conversation, not every day, but
every day.
Okay, wait, I let you
wake
into
up
my house.
did I tell you about Simon? Okay. Yeah.
It's just me looking in a mirror. Did I tell you about Simon today?
The man in the mirror always talks back.
And but you have a very thoughtful approach to the things that you discuss, and specifically when it comes to this, and it's a whole nother language, it's a whole nother world, and it's, potentially we're going to talk about the overlapping of extreme weather events and paranormal activity. We've got some other personal stories of yours, plus coworker stuff or people wild stories. And so we're just going to see where we go here. It's going to be a little unpredictable potentially. We're just going to see where the conversation goes. But first, I do think the listeners would be interested to know about, how does one become a professional storm chaser? And what I mean by that is not like, oh, I went to school, blah, blah, blah. It's like, so you're a kid and the thunderclouds roll in. Most people are like, let's get inside. But you're like, no, let me outside. Like, what is this, like this love and fascination? Can you pinpoint where it comes from?
I don't know. So I can remember, I have a lot of memories from when I was a young child, and I can nail down one of my earliest memories of a thunderstorm. And so I was watching a t-ball game that my brothers were in, and I was too young to be in t-ball. I was probably like 3 years old, could have been 2 years old maybe, in the stands with my mom. And I remember what field we were located at the ballpark, because there were multiple little fields that the kids were playing Little League baseball. And we were at this field that was next to the concession stand, and we were looking, what I now know was to the southwest from the stands, towards the direction of this. It's not there anymore, but it was an A&W root beer stand. And the sky was just this really dark, almost black. And it was like a light gray around us, but it was like almost black on the horizon. And I could see like lightning bolts. And back then, it probably wasn't as common for people to be like, okay, if you can see lightning or hear thunder, you should get the kids off the field, or just get off the field because there's a chance you get struck by lightning. That might not have been as common then. What ended up getting people to get the kids off the field is, I remember some parents like chattering and saying, and I remember the word tornado warning, and all of a sudden the stands just emptied, and they went running out on the field and grabbed their kids and went running back to their cars, and everybody was getting out of there. I remember we rushed home. And to me, that was what I remember was that was a really big moment for me, because to that point, my parents were like gods. They controlled everything in our lives. When we go to sleep, what we did, where we went, when we ate, all that stuff. They punished us, everything. And this is at a pretty young age. I just remember thinking, I'm like, wow, grown-ups are scared of something. So then I was fascinated. I was scared of it, but I was fascinated that there was something that scared the grown-ups.
Wow.
And that was a really big deal to me. So I think that's what maybe triggered this fascination. So from then on out, when there was a big thunderstorm, whether there was a tornado warning or not, my face was like plastered to the window or plastered to the screen in our back porch. And it just grew from there. And then when I learned more about storms, the fear started going away because I now understood them and understood the weather more. And then I wanted to learn more and learn more. And I ended up eventually going to college to get a meteorology degree. But I didn't go to the college to get a meteorology degree because I thought I was going to get a job in meteorology. I just wanted to learn more about the weather. And I didn't know really what I was going to get a job in. And as I was getting my degree, so I went out to the University of Oklahoma in Norman, Oklahoma. And
is that Tornado Alley?
Yeah, and Tornado Alley is like really vague. And now like there's this, because of statistics getting a little bit better, there's like the main Tornado Alley, which is like this corridor that goes up and down like the I-35 area, like through Oklahoma and then up through central Kansas and into Nebraska, maybe a little bit of Texas. But really, you got that, and then there's this other peak area kind of in central Illinois and Indiana, and then another area of high tornado activity that's pretty much just equal, like if you're talking about numbers of tornadoes, to the traditional Great Plains Tornado Alley. There's this little corridor in the southeast that goes through like Mississippi and Alabama that's probably has the equal number of tornadoes. Now, the frequency of the really significant tornadoes might not be as high. Like a lot of the tornadoes that occur there are a little bit on the weaker end, but the number of tornadoes is probably just equal to the number that occur in Tornado Alley, traditional Tornado Alley.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great Southern rock that references these, that has like tornado references in it. It's like, like I just love the line, like it's from a drive-by trucker song. It's like it sounded like a train,
Yeah.
But real quick before we move on to like the next steps for you. And like what sparked the chasing, you touched on a couple things that I think are really fascinating. One is the authority, right? And like what is beyond what I thought was the ultimate authority becomes a fascination. And I think that plays itself out in so many different ways in our society, in our world, with everybody in different ways, whether it's like, religion or whatever else. And then also this idea of being really, being afraid of something until you learn about it, which is, it's just our life, right? And you can see that play out in so many different ways too. Like, because when we're afraid of something that we don't it's usually because we don't understand it.
Yeah.
And you see that with differences between people. And I think that's playing out in so many different fronts currently in our society right now, like in the, gender politics and all this other kind of stuff. People just don't understand it, and they're afraid of it. They get angry about it, which are the steps. But so do you find yourself, when you don't understand anything, do you find yourself chasing to understand what it means, and just in general?
A lot of the time, yeah. I'm very interested in many subjects. Like it doesn't have to be natural disasters or anything like that. It could be pretty much anything. I can find fascination in everything, and everything has a history too. So, and I love learning about history and about like why things are the way they are. I'm kind of like one of those people where, let's say I'm like working on something, like I'm doing a project or I'm helping someone dig ditches or something like that. Who knows what it is? Who knows what it is that I'm helping someone with, or I'm going to work somewhere. If someone's like teaching me how to do something, I'm not really content with just doing what they show me. Like I want to know why is it like you're doing this? Why is it you're doing that? Like I'm not gonna just like start doing something if I don't understand what
You're
it
looking
is.
for meaning.
Yes. Looking to understand why. What is the reason for doing this? Because in the future, I might come across, like so I understand what it is we're doing more, as like what it is that I'm doing, and whatever the project happens to be. If I understand why we're doing it, as opposed to just being like, yep, okay, follow the leader. I'm a sheep.
Yeah.
And I guess
So actually learning something as opposed
Yeah.
to mimicking behavior.
Yes. And so I was the youngest of three boys, and we were all really close in age. But I was the kid that was really annoying the shit out of my parents by asking them why.
Why?
And I wasn't doing it. So some kids do it, of course, like to just annoy their parents. I was doing it to understand why. Like I'd be like, why does this do this? And then like my mom's like, I don't know. And then she like give me some bullshit answer, and I'd be like, but why would you do that? Why would you do that to do this? And then because she wouldn't know what the real answer, or she maybe didn't have a whole lot of time. She was busy doing something else. And so yeah, my parents would get really aggravated with me asking why all the time, just because I was really wanting to understand why. And I ended up gravitating towards my grandfather, my dad's father, because he would take the time when I was over at their house. He would take the time to show me why, or explain why, or explain what he knew about something, and then would say other people kind of believe other things, but this is kind of what I do, but other people do things a different way. And he always kind of said that. He always said, this is how I do it, or this is what I understand about it. But he always kind of like went and said, other people do it differently, and would say that everything had some gray to it because there's no right or wrong way specifically. He would just say why he did it a certain way.
That's interesting.
And yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I mean I think it's a very poignant lesson to be teaching to someone at a young age. And there's, because I know people, because some people are, this is how you do it. And I know you've done it, even if I know you've done it, like I had a flat tire 2 days ago. I had a flat tire on my car. And I was at my mom and stepdad's house. And I've changed my own tires more times than I wish I had to, right? And my stepdad's like, a retired architect, he knows his brain works, right? And knows how to do things practically. And so he comes out to like just observe and like help lend a hand. He's got the tools in his garage, etc. And he keeps telling me how to change the tire as I'm doing it. And I mentioned to him a couple different times, like, oh no, I've changed a tire like on the side of a highway in the middle of the night before with no light. I know how to jack up my car. I know how to get the thing going. And he just keeps telling me how I should be doing it. Right? Yeah. Which it's him trying to be helpful, right? And trying to, in his opinion, make it easier than the way maybe I'm doing it, potentially. But so that reminds me of like a different approach to the way you can explain something to someone and being like, well, this is the way I do it. Not everybody does it this way.
Yeah.
Now my stepdad just doesn't want me to, hurt myself probably. Right. But it is interesting, like different people's brains operate in different ways when it comes to instruction or sharing of information.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting because so many people don't learn that lesson at a young age about there are many ways and the grayness of things.
Yes. Yeah. The grayness.
Yeah. That's, and then, go figure, you spend a large part of your life, for lack of better terms, chasing the grayness. I think about the skies. Like whenever we say the grayness, I just think about, because I've done enough driving to where you're driving and it's beautifully sunny. There's just nothing in the sky except blue. And then 5 minutes later, it's like 2 p.m. You're like, oh, it looks like midnight up there.
Yep.
And you can see the sheets of rain coming down. And then I've done enough driving now to where I realize, oh, this one is this one is probably a little bit scary. And then sure enough, you hear your phone will beep with a tornado warning or something like that. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this one is too dark and too purple or just whatever. Like this is scary to me. It's not so much scary to you, but I don't understand.
Yeah.
Right. And so you go to college just to learn about storms, essentially, right? And to
learn about weather
and weather in general.
Yeah, and it's I mean, my degree is meteorology, and there's different meteorology programs around the country. Like in fact, there's a few that have popped up relatively recently. And when I say recently, it could be a decade or 15 years. But there's some programs around the country that are journalist-based meteorology programs. They're less math intensive. So I went to the one that's like math intensive. The program I went to was meant to train undergrads to go into graduate school and do like even more intensive math. And really what like my meteorology degree is to give people a better idea of what it was. It's basically it should have been a degree in thermodynamics and fluid dynamics, because that's a majority of my classes. Like you had to have a good understanding of differential equations before you could even sign up for a lot of my classes. So that's kind of like where it went, and it's great, and it helped. And some of my fellow students were really good at doing the equations, but they were really bad at applying what they learned in fluid dynamics and thermodynamics into the real world. Some were pretty good about just basic meteorology stuff in the real world, and were bad at doing the equations. And I feel like me and a few other people that I went to school with were really good at being able to apply what we were doing in the classroom to what was going on out in the atmosphere. And that helped us to become much better storm chasers.
Yeah, I'm curious about. I want to talk about the launch into that, and and the people, and I'm guessing it's like comedy. There might be a ton of storm chasers out there, but the community is pretty small once you're in it. As far as like. Everybody kind of has an idea of who else is in the community to a certain degree. But before we do that, I want to just remind people that you can go to patreon.com/Ryan Singer. You can get all these interviews and conversations and episodes without commercials for $3 a month at patreon.com. And there's other tiers over there as well. So you can go to patreon.com/Ryan Singer. You can get take down capitalism with me, even though I'm getting the money from the people listening to commercials. So we'll be right back with Simon. We're talking about storm chasing. We're talking about all kinds of things. We're talking about the unpredictable nature of the universe, I think, is what we'll probably be getting into as well. And we're back. So we've been talking about thermodynamics and fluid dynamics, and quite frankly, I've never heard the word combination fluid dynamics in my life before until just now, and I have no idea what that even means. But I imagine one of those scientists in the war room on one of these like weather apocalyptic movies, where they're like, what's happening? And then someone runs into the room. I've done the numbers, and the tornado is going to be this big, at this time or whatever. You know what I mean? And it's going to cause this much, and the flooding, the water will raise this much because of the hurricane, the super hurricane that's coming or whatever, right? And there's probably a shark in it or something.
Yeah.
But, that's what I think of when I think of fluid dynamics and thermodynamics, right?
Yeah. So fluid dynamics really is kind of as straightforward as it might actually. I mean, it sounds complicated, right? But like rocket scientists, like when you hear someone say rocket scientist, you all of a sudden think, oh my gosh, crazy. But really, it's like the basics of it is rocket, and they're the scientists based on trying to get that rock. So fluid dynamics is basically and it gets really, the math gets complicated and the physics gets complicated, but it's really fluids, and fluids could be like a gel substance, rock, molten rock it becomes is a fluid, and rocks in general, like the plate tectonics, rocks, even when they're not molten rock like lava, magma, rock in general can act like a fluid. And liquid is any kind of liquid, whether it's water, the ocean, anything like that. And then the air as well acts like a fluid. The atmosphere acts like a fluid. Air molecules, large groups of air molecules act like a fluid. So so it's the dynamics is the understanding the movement of those fluids, and that's fluid dynamics. And then you combine that with thermodynamics, and you think thermometer, temperature, so the heat exchange going on. So you combine those two, like heat exchange, the changes in pressure and everything, and the way the atmosphere moves. And then imagine this whole moving fluid atmosphere that's going on with the unequal heating from the sun, rays hitting the equator more directly, so more energy going towards the equator and less going towards the poles. So you have that unequal heat exchange, so the heat's trying to transfer between the equator to the poles. So you got all that going on, and then you put that on a sphere that's rotating, and then you just that really changes things. So we're constantly in class, like going between like spherical coordinates and changing reference frames for different things, because when you go to a really small, things seem like they're isolated, and when you go really big, they act on a bigger scale. Anyway,
I'm curious if large groups of people also act like a fluid.
Yes.
And, it makes me think of like, okay, well, you combine that with thermodynamics and like changing climate, right? Like where will be people, like people moving in mass to certain locations. It's interesting because there are certain cities that have already declared themselves climate change sanctuary cities, essentially, trying to like bring more people there. As it's weird. I mean, we will use anything for financial benefit in this world. If there's one thing I've learned, but yeah, I could imagine people move like fluid together.
Yeah. People really act a lot like individual molecules. So if you took like, just to say just the air around us right now, you close it all off into an aquarium, like a airtight aquarium, and you apply heat to it, and the molecules start to get a lot of energy to them, so they start bouncing around faster. They're wanting to get away from each other. They're hitting each other. They all have high energy. They're wanting to get away from each other. All of a sudden, you open up the aquarium, and they just spread out. Those air molecules do. And people can be the same. They'll like bunch together for one reason, and then they like realize they don't like being so close to each other. And especially if they have a lot of energy, they're wanting to get out, and they're like spreading out and going out into the...
You just described what happened to so many people living in large cities during COVID.
Yeah.
Moving to like farmhouses or whatever else, right? Everyone got out of it. Once they could work remotely, they realized they didn't want to be so close to all these other people.
Yeah.
And they got out.
And the Industrial Revolution was similar. All of a sudden, everyone flooded the cities for jobs, and then they realized they didn't want to... At some point, they realized, like, this is crazy. We don't want to be so close to each other, and they went out to the suburbs.
I mean, it's almost sad how predictable we are.
Yeah. Like, and then people will be like, I want to go to this concert, and they're like, to go to this concert, I have to be around 40,000 other people in this arena, and then they're there and they're having a good time, and then the concert starts to wear down. They're like, get me out of here.
Yeah, get me the hell out of here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really fascinating. I'm curious about the predictable nature of weather, and I've heard so many different things, and I don't know what's true. Like when they say, well, you can't... I've heard this, and I can definitely get a definitive answer from you on this, I think. Well, you never really can predict the future more than 12 to 16 hours out. Or something, if then even. So when you see the 5-day forecast or the 10-day forecast, it's like, don't even bother looking at that. essentially, is what someone has told me, who's not a meteorologist, by the way.
Yeah. So it all comes down to scale, kind of, because forecasting the weather is limited by several different things. It's limited by, and really this just comes down to a lot of things in science. It's all about measurements. So you can only measure so much. There's only so many measurement sites, like at the surface. There's only so many weather balloons that go. There's twice a day. There's only so many stations around the country and around the world that release weather balloons to get the depth of, like, an observation of the depth of the atmosphere. There's sensors that are on planes, so when planes take off, they have sensors on them that go back to the like NOAA, where they can get measurements from them. Satellites help a lot, and the better the satellites get, the better satellite measurements get. But then again, satellites are limited. Their data gets worse and worse as they get closer to the surface, because they're getting all kinds of different feedback because they're going through all these layers of the atmosphere, the information they're getting. Same for radar and stuff like that. So everything's limited by the observations. So right there, you got a limit. And then when you go through time, those holes in observations start to cause errors in forecasting as you go through time. So those errors get bigger and bigger and bigger because of the limitations of the observations, because nothing's perfect. And then maybe some of the observations had errors. So those errors are thrown into that pool of data that you have to try to make your forecast. So if you're talking about large-scale stuff, there's meteorologists that can make decent forecasts for large-scale movements of pattern changes, sometimes up to months in advance for pattern changes. Not for like what's going to be at your house or your state or your country, but for large-scale global pattern changes. Sometimes you can get okay forecasts for like a couple months out even. But this is for these like large scale patterns. And then when you're talking about whether it's a good idea to go camping next week, that's where you start to have problems. For maybe a week to 2 weeks out, under certain conditions, under certain patterns, I can get a general idea of what the weather's going to be like if it's a certain pattern, like a relatively stable pattern. And when I say stable, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not some big disaster going on somewhere. It just means that there might be a massive trough, large-scale trough that's sitting over an area that's not going to budge for a couple weeks. And then there's a ridge next to it that's not going to budge for a couple of weeks. So I can get a good idea that for the next couple of weeks, this pattern is going to pretty much hold. And the chances that you're going to have good weather like 2 weeks out, or bad weather 2 weeks out is pretty high. But then when you have, when a pattern like that is not in place and you have more of movement going on, we refer to that as a progressive pattern, meaning there's a lot of movement going on in large scale troughs and ridges. This progressive pattern's going on. It really 3 days out maximum, I could give you a good idea what stuff's going to be like.
Yeah, it all sounds so chaotic to me. Like, I can't let go of that thought. Like, when it comes to the idea that weather can be whatever it wants, whenever it wants, typically, and there's obviously factors that go into the types and the styles or whatever and the patterns. But, when I think about weather in general on the globe, it seems like there has never been, is it safe to say there's never been the exact same month of weather as there's ever been in the history of, it's like always a new thing. It's always different. It's always slightly different. It's changing constantly. And so that's what I mean when I think of like chaos theory, almost like there's no control. It's almost like anarchy at its finest.
Well, to us, it seems like it, but really everything is exactly the way that it's supposed to be. So when I tell people that I'm going to go out and chase storms, I tell them, this stuff's going to happen or not happen, whether I'm out there chasing it or not. So I have to go out there and try to be out there with the weather. Like if the, I see the potential for like a big weather event, like I know, so when I go out to chase storms, I'm not saying there's definitely going to be a tornado tomorrow, Now there have been a couple events where all the parameters were coming together so perfectly where I had my mind, it was like a 99.999% chance. I was like, I'm going to see a big tornado today. Like something's really messed up if I don't see a big tornado today. Really messed up. And I'm hitting my hand on the table. Sorry, I'm getting excited. But
get excited about really big tornadoes.
Yeah. So let's say that there's just a small handful of situations where I was like, okay, everything's coming together so perfectly that unless something really out off the wall happens, I'm going to probably see a tornado today. But even in some of the really monstrous outbreaks, I know there's a couple parameters that we just don't have good enough data on, because once again it comes down to the observation stations and everything, and how often they report and everything like that, and problems with numerical models and everything, because numerical models, they're just equations that are like running over and over and over to produce an output. And anyway, so there's like enough uncertainty even in some of the before some of the biggest outbreaks occur. There's enough uncertainty to know that we don't know enough about a certain parameter that everything can just like fall apart at the last second, and you end up getting like a big fat squall line instead of a tornado outbreak with individual supercells producing long track tornadoes everywhere. So yeah, it can seem to a lot of people, and I understand, like it can seem like super chaotic, but really it's not that chaotic until like a massive asteroid hits the planet. It's really it's not that chaotic. I mean, it's kind of like think about like you have your own little puddle in front of your house, and you're sitting by your puddle, and pretend this puddle is like the ocean, and if you don't want anything to change that puddle, you got to like seal it off and protect it from everything outside of it. I mean, you're going to have like bugs going into the puddle. You might throw rocks into the puddle, or somebody else might throw pebbles into the puddle. The sun's beating down. It's going to evaporate the puddle. The ground underneath it might be warm and start to evaporate the puddle. So, I mean, the puddle's not going to stay the same. That puddle's going to change, and the Earth is the same thing. The universe is the same thing. You're the same thing. Everything's moving around. There's energy being exchanged left and right. There's chemical reactions going on. There's all these other forces going on. So things are changing,
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about, these, limitations to data, and the further you get away from something, the bigger, or, the more uncertain it can be when it comes to measurements of things. And it really makes me think of paranormal investigations, and to a large degree, because there's so much that's the unknown when it comes to the measurement. And you can go to a place like maybe Poasttown Elementary School, which is legendary, and so many people have claimed or gathered evidence there, and to the point where it's like, okay, well, is this place so famous? Or some of these really well-known places, it's like, okay, well, you're going in knowing you're going to get something, so you're going to get something. Whether you get something or you don't get something, you're getting something, if that makes sense, right? But when it comes to these devices trying to measure activity, paranormal activity, in my opinion, we're so far removed from the activity itself, as far as being able to directly observe it with, like, say, our eyes, our ears, or our senses are probably the closest thing we have, as opposed to, some spirit boxes, which I think are a step further away than just our body as a measurement device. But, I mean, and even our bodies, it's like, we can't see certain light, or on the spectrum, or can't hear certain sounds on the noise spectrum or whatever. So we're removed to a certain degree, and so that is interesting to me. The weather is almost weather is that way with these devices. Because I think so many of us just assume that we're so advanced now that we should know everything about everything. It's like, no, we're not nearly as advanced as maybe we think we are, right? Especially in retrospect, in another 50 years, we'll look back and be like, oh, we thought we had good stuff. Hopefully.
Oh my gosh. Like
hopefully, right? That's what happens.
Yeah, the changes that have gone on in the world of meteorology since the satellite era, which would have been the 1960s, have been like, it's been incredible. Like that's really like a scientific field that has really made some leaps and bounds. And then from the 90s onward, like too, it's been.
I'm curious about something, and this just popped into my mind. Do you know the secret formula that the Farmer's Almanac uses to predict the weather into the future? I know that there's
it's
secret
this formula that starts with a B and ends with an S, or I guess that's, or I guess it ends with a T. But I mean,
oh shit! I think I am so fascinated by the Farmer's Almanac. But anyway, we can talk about that another time. I want to get into this idea of making the leap, and really going for it. And I mean, some of the people you've met, and we gotta talk about this story. I recorded it on my phone, I think, and then when you were like done, I think I don't even know what, I haven't listened to it, and I was thinking maybe I'll put this on Patreon or something, but I'd rather just have you tell the story here,
okay,
instead of it's on my phone recording. But so you go into meteorology, you're in school, you're meeting other people who are interested in this field, obviously. And then there's a percentage of these people that you're in school with that are interested in storm chasing.
Yep.
I'm guessing it's not everyone in the class. Maybe some of them wanted to be meteorologists or whatever else, or just work at weather centers or whatever else they want to do. But there's definitely a percentage. I don't know. Is that a high percentage of people who go into this field are interested in storm chasing, or is it a small percentage? I have no idea.
Oh boy. So I specifically went to a university that was located in the Great Plains, and so there might have been a higher percentage of meteorology students that were at that particular school in the middle of what's traditionally known as Tornado Alley. There might have been a higher percentage of students that like were interested in chasing while they were there, but only 4, and this is from different class levels, like through the years, only like 4 or 5 that I know of, like really continued pursuing storm chasing, like whether it was their full-time job or like as a part-time job even.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'd say while I was there, like the student body that I knew of, probably half of the kids going there, like, or the young people going there, would go out and chase storms from time to time, and once again, just like a very small handful would go out as much as they could, like I did.
Yeah, I'm curious if we can pinpoint who, the first or some of the first storm chasers were.
There's a chance that there might be some storm chasers that just never, they went out and chased and photographed storms and kept it to themselves. There are a couple that were chasing in the 1950s and 60s, like just by themselves, but they like let people know. They like would either sell their photographs or footage, or just try to get in contact with other people who were interested in weather and like send in their stuff. And so then people knew about them. And I remember one was this a man by the name of David Hoadley, and this is really bad. I mean, I'm bad with names, so this is not surprising, but there's a couple.
Yeah.
And then like more started to show up based out of universities that were studying severe weather. And then as like people start, so then there was this program that came out in the mid 80s. I think it might have been 1985 or 1984. It was a PBS Nova program on storm chasing. And that was my first introduction to storm chasing, was seeing this program in the mid '80s, and I was like, "Whoa, that's really cool!" And it followed this Dr. Howard Bluestein, who actually took a class with Bluestein, which was like full circle, I guess.
Oh, that's really cool.
At the University of Oklahoma. But Dr. Bluestein had a team going out, and they were testing this mobile radar, and it wasn't like mounted on a truck. They actually had to pull the radar out of the van and like set it up and aim it at the tornado and everything.
Wow.
So it was like, and it was really, of course, computers were kind of rough back then, and technology was a little bit rough back then. But eventually that led to these huge radar trucks, these mobile radar trucks. A lot of people call them DOWs, Doppler on wheels, radar trucks. But anyway, that NOVA program inspired so many people around the country and around the world to like maybe leave their house and go search storms. Just leave their house, whether they wanted to be a meteorologist or whether they just wanted to go, storm spotter or whatever. That it really inspired them, and them seeing like tornado videos on the news, whether whoever collected the tornado video, whether it was a chaser or somebody at their backyard, inspired people to go out. So like the field just kept growing and growing and growing.
If there's something I want to talk about, we'll get into this, and then maybe after that we'll tell the story, or the one story specifically that we're thinking about. But the because we do have to take a quick break here again, just as a reminder, because I think this conversation is going to go over the allotted time limit for just one commercial break. So let's do a quick break again. Patreon.com/Ryan Singer. $3 a month. That's all. Gets you commercial-free episodes. I put those up on Patreon usually the night before at least, or maybe even days before the episode comes out. So you can check that out for $3 a month, and we'll be right back with Simon talking about storms. I want to talk about, when we come back, like just the profound, I want to talk about like the emotional, even potentially spiritual effect that witnessing an intense storm or event can have. And we'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So we're talking about, the inspiration from the NOVA program, which I remember that. I mean, that was wild. And, I haven't thought about it in forever. But as soon as you said NOVA, I was like, oh, my God, I know what that is. But there is something, and I, just from, doing as much driving around the country and through, like, the Great Plains and stuff during the summers and things like that, there have been times where I've been like, oh, my God, I'm getting caught in something that's like a tornado, and I got to get the hell out of here pretty quickly. But there is something so awe-inspiring, majestic, and just unexplainable to me about witnessing like a storm, especially before it cracks. I don't even know what the right word is, but like before it happens, it's just like you feel it, the energy, the goosebumps. It's akin to like having a paranormal experience in some ways. It's like this unexplainable energy has suddenly invaded and is the dominant force, and it is making you very aware of it. And obviously, there's ways to measure this with storms, right?
Yeah. There's a lot. It's all about energy transfer. Everything's all about energy transfer when it comes to meteorology. And water molecules are amazing mediums for energy transfer. On this planet, water exists in a liquid, naturally exists in a liquid. Let me rephrase that, because now here's the scientist in me coming out. So water on Earth's surface, not below the surface, because below the surface there's a lot of minerals and a lot of molecules that can be in liquid, solid, and gas state. But on Earth's surface, under average conditions, water is the only molecule that exists in the liquid, gas, and solid state on the regular. So you have ice. It's a solid. It's a rock. It's a temporary rock for us. But if Earth was colder, it'd be like really cold, and there was no gas or liquid. It would just all be a rock form. Anyone would be like, okay, this is a rock. This is a rock. There's no liquid or anything. But to us, we see the ice in our drink, and all that. Anyway, So it's a gas. It's in the air all around us. When it's really humid, it gets really uncomfortable for us because our sweat doesn't evaporate as easily. So it gets really, really uncomfortable for us. Our sweat starts building up because it's not evaporating because there's so much gaseous water in the air already in the gas form. And then, like, with ice, of course, like in liquid water that we drink, we need water to survive. Most of our body is composed of water. Well, water's a great medium to transfer energy. So when you see that big storm, that's all water. There's the clouds are little water droplets, and the more of those water droplets there are, the darker the storm because it's blocking the sunlight. There's ice crystals in that storm. Most of the raindrops you feel are started off as snowflakes way up in the storm and melted on their way down. And then, of course, there's hail. Hail can form in the storm. And then, so like the air heats up, the ground heats up, the gas rises. It rises high enough to where it condenses. And when it condenses, doing that phase change releases heat. I'm sorry, I moved my hands a lot.
It's all right.
When the gas condenses into those little cloud droplets, it releases heat going from phase change. So that's where the heat exchange comes from. So let's just start with the ocean real quick. I'll do real quick thermodynamics here. Okay, so you start with the ocean. The ocean's liquid and it's a certain temperature. The sun's solar radiation coming down heats up the ocean. That energy is being absorbed. Those water molecules in the ocean get to a certain vibration, a certain temperature to where they go from the liquid form to the gas form. Now that actually causes a cooling. That's why you feel a little bit cooler, or that's when you feel cold coming out of the shower, or you feel cold when it rains and you get soaked by this cooler rain, but also like it's evaporating off of you, and it causes a cooling effect because it's absorbing energy. So that phase change from a liquid from whether it's going from a solid to a liquid or a liquid to a gas, it absorbs energy. That water molecule absorbs energy. It's becoming more energetic.
Oh, I wish it would just rain so it would cool off. You hear that all the time.
This morning, I don't know if you walked outside last night. It was muggy. It was like dew points in the upper 70s. It was like 83 degrees last night at like around midnight. I walked outside and was like, oh man, this reminds me of like Oklahoma during the summertime. And this morning, we had big thunderstorms come through. I walked out in between storms, and it felt so good because the rain cooled everything off for a little bit. Now it's getting hot and humid again. But anyway, that's, storms, hurricanes, blizzards, severe supercell thunderstorms that produce big tornadoes, all that is because of the heat exchange. Because of the unequal heating from the lower latitudes to the higher latitudes. And that transfer is made possible because of water. So water is what the medium for that heat transfer. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm so on board with the idea of water in general, just holding energy and understanding energy to a certain degree. Like when it comes to the water droplet experiments that I'm really big into from Dr. Masaru Emoto about, sending intention, positive, loving, or negative and hurtful. Anyway, water is it just blows my mind. And that's what we're looking for in the universe when we're looking for life.
Yeah.
It's just like, was there sign of water?
Yeah.
And, so that to me is it's just mind blowing. I'm curious if, now this friend of yours there's this really wild story that you told while we were having I would describe it as we had a woo-woo weekend up near Lake Michigan. And was this a storm chaser friend of yours?
Yep. Yeah, it was a storm chaser friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you just want to start from I'll just let you tell the story because I'm not even sure how to properly lead this in. It's just so wild. Yeah.
Okay. So my friend, he's a storm chaser. He doesn't chase as much as he used to. But he started off at University of Oklahoma with me, and he was in the meteorology program, and we stayed really good friends over the years. And every once in a while, whenever I'm coming through the area, central Oklahoma, I usually give them a ring and say, hey, I'm coming through, want to hang out, want to go do something. And this particular time, I had contacted him. I was at the end of a chase season, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be swinging through. I got a couple free days. I know you've been dying to go out to Capulin Volcano National Monument. It's like trying to remember how long of a drive. It's like an 8 or 9 hour drive from Norman, Oklahoma. And he's like, yeah, but I got some. It's like I'm gonna be working tonight, and after work, if you wanna come, I'm working tonight and tomorrow. But after work, I'll have 1 day off. But I'm gonna be exhausted. I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. It's like I'll pick you up early in the morning. Like while it's still dark. And I was like, I'll just drive. You can sleep. And then we'll get out to Capulin and we'll do some hiking or whatever. And maybe even go out to like Great Sand Dunes or something. Anyway, and then I'll just do all the drive and drive back. Because that's all I do when I'm chasing storms. I'm just driving like nonstop. I usually average somewhere between 60,000 to 80,000 miles a year driving. And I think my biggest year, I drove like maybe like 110,000, 120,000 miles that year. Anyway. So I said, I'm chasing in New Mexico today. I'll give you a call tomorrow morning and see where we're going, see what's going on with, make sure our plans keep going. So I chased in New Mexico, got this big tornado, and it was pretty cool. And then I drove as far as I could towards Norman that night, but I ended up stopping in Amarillo at like a truck stop, and it was like the sun was like starting to come up, so I just pulled over to take a nap. And I woke up. And I call him up to see if everything was still cool so I could come pick him up the next day. And we can go drive up to Capulin. And he's like, man, something weird happened last night. He's like, something really weird happened. He works with a lot of people. I'm not going to say where he works, but he works with a lot of people. And he's kind of like the supervisor of everybody. But he doesn't have a whole lot of interaction with them. He's not the head boss. He's just like this, like kind of a general supervisor. And this woman who he said he's never talked to her before. She's very standoffish, doesn't talk to anybody. So it's not like she's like friends with anybody. This woman like approached him and started telling him, asked him to do something for her, for one, and go someplace and do something for her. And just started telling him this like story, kind of a little bit about her life, and this like really important thing that she wanted to do for him. And so she approached him and literally said, "Hey, are you going to Capulin Volcano this week?" And he is just like, "What the heck?" He's like. He's like, I haven't told anybody this. He's like, I had a chat with you on the phone. You don't know anybody I work with, and you haven't like posted that you're going to Capulin and that your friend's going. He's like, what the heck? I'm like, who? What the hell? What? Why would she just come up to me out of the blue and say
Never
this?
having talked. It's not like he's on his phone at work being like, yeah, let's go to Capulin.
No,
none of that's happened.
And he's like. I don't know what his idea of witchy is, but he said she always has this like really witchy vibe, and it always stays kind of keeps to herself at work and everything. But anyway, he said she just came right up to him after never talking to her really before, besides saying hi or whatever. Not even like small talk. He's like, I don't talk to her, and almost no one else does. And she just comes up and just. Are you going to Capulin like this week? And he was so weirded out he didn't even ask her how she knew. And he's like, maybe my friend's coming over to pick me up in like 2 days, and we're supposed to go up there. And she starts telling him, I'm from this little town called Capulin next to the monument. It's a very small town. It's in northeastern New Mexico. It's a very beautiful area. It's this old volcanic field. It's a bunch of these little volcanoes all over the place. There's shield volcanoes and little cinder cones. I think there might be an old composite volcano. They're all extinct volcanoes. And Capulin, I think it's estimated that it erupted. It's a cinder cone, like almost perfect cinder cone. That's why it's a national monument. It erupted maybe 50 or 60,000 years ago. Could have been 80,000, somewhere in that range. Which geologically, that's not very long. Anything less than 1 million years isn't that long. But cinder cones are kind of a one and done volcano, so it's not like Capulin's going to come back to life. Cinder cones, it's like let's say a shield volcano or a composite volcano is like a geyser, and it just keeps going. You don't really know. So they're either extinct, meaning they're not going to come back to life again. Their plumbing is shut down, or it's dormant, meaning that the plumbing's still active. You just don't know when it's going to erupt. But cinder cones are kind of like a pimple. They show up, they burst, and then they're done. And that's what cinder cones are. They're a one and done type of volcano. If you ever see a cinder cone, they're never gonna activate again. There might be activity around them or on top of them, whatever, from something else, but that vent's done. It's long gone. Anyway, so Capulin's this beautiful cinder cone in northeast New Mexico. It's a tourist attraction. It's really cool. If you ever go up there in that region, I recommend going there. It's a beautiful, almost a magical feel to it. And I would say it has kind of a magical feel to it. But once again, that's feelings. That's not scientific stuff.
But we're all about feelings on
Okay.
this show.
So anyway, so back to the main story. This woman tells him this, and this is boom, right up to him. Tells him, "I'm from Capulin, the little town. I think she said she was half Native American, and most of her family was Native American. Her extended family all lived in this town, and she was in a really abusive marriage, and everyone and she said everyone in her family and her friends in this town supported her husband and his family. And she said her only option to get out of this was literally to run and hide. She left and never went back and cut off all contact with everyone, and went to Oklahoma and central Oklahoma and just has been hiding from these people. And she said she's terrified to even go back and show her face at all, that anyone might recognize her, and then bad things would happen to her, she thinks. So she tells him this, but she said, my aunt, who I was really close to, passed away shortly after she had bolted, and she was going to leave her this little something. She was going to leave her something, and it was going to be in a metal box with her name on it, like punched into it, and that this little tin was going to be at her grave in this little cemetery south of town. And she asked my friend, let's call him Bill, because I didn't ask him if it's okay to have his name out there, so I'm going to call him Bill. So my friend Bill is freaked out, and she's like, when you go up there to go to Capulin, can you go by this cemetery and get this little tin box for me, this little metal box? And it might not have been tin, it might have been aluminum, or steel, but it was a metal box. And he's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know about this. I don't know. This is creepy. He's like, I don't know about this. And she's like, well, you can't just go up and get the box. And she handed him this pile of these little, I don't even know what to call them. It's these little packets. And I guess a week before she came up and approached him. So this is before he knew that I had contacted him and said we were going to go to Capulin, or asked him to go to Capulin. So the week beforehand, she had gone up to northern Oklahoma to this place called Great Salt Plain State Park, and a lot of people go up there and dig in this dry lake bed for these selenite crystals, these special selenite crystals. She had gone up there the week prior, apparently knowing that this was going to happen, that this whole thing was going to take place, and dug up a bunch of these selenite crystals and made these little special packets with the selenite crystals and some other herbs and things to leave these little individual packets at the grave sites of these certain people and her family that she wanted to leave them by, including her aunt, where the box was supposedly right there in front of her headstone. She had gone up and made all these. So she's there ready and comes up to him, tells him this story and says, here, you have to take these packets and put each one by the headstone. And I think she also gave him something that he had to kind of say or something when we were leaving the cemetery. And she said, you'll be protected and everything will be good if you go and do this. And he is freaked out. He was raised Catholic, but the moment he left home to go to college, he never went to church again. Apparently, he was not into. He wasn't supposedly, and he didn't. He claimed that he wasn't into religion. And here's the funny thing about him: he's he says he's not. So he's like, I don't really believe in ghosts. So he said this a couple times. He's like, I don't really believe in ghosts, but I don't want that stuff around me. I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it. And he's like, because one of our other friends is really big into ghost hunting. And we joke around about it all the time. And then when that friend would come to town, he's like, I don't want him in my apartment. I don't want him here and possibly bringing some ghost or something. Not that I believe in that, but I'm just saying I don't want it here.
That's
so
really
he's
funny.
he doesn't want a Ouija board, because I was joking about getting him a Ouija board because he says this. He's like, don't get that around me. He's like, apparently you can't get rid of them. I'm like, what do you mean you can't get rid of them? He's like, apparently if you try to throw it away, it'll just show back up. And I'm like, but I thought you don't believe in that stuff. He's like, I don't. I just don't want it around me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, come on, dude. Come on, Bill. And so he's wigged out. He tells me this. So I'm sitting in this. So the sun's beating down on me. I maybe got a 2-hour nap in the early morning at this truck stop outside Amarillo, Texas. And he's telling me this, and I'm just like, what the hell? We have to do this, Bill. We have to do this. I'm like, we have to go do this little adventure. So we have to do this little adventure. This is just too perfect. And he's really wigged out. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you have all these little packets, right? And he said, yeah. And I took them home. I'm like, so you didn't hand them back to her. You took them. Did you tell her you're definitely going to do this? And he's like, I didn't say I definitely was going to do it, but I said maybe if I have time. I'm like, we can leave even earlier so that we have time to do it. And he said, I just don't know about this. This is creepy. We're going to go to some cemetery out in the middle of nowhere, because it was kind of it was 9 miles south of town, or six or 9 miles south of town.
So it wasn't right there.
It wasn't right there in town. And it really was kind of, and it was in a
very remote. And
so I'm like, oh, we got to do this. So I drove to Norman, Oklahoma, got there, and we chatted about it even more because I had more questions. And I'm like, okay, we got to do this. And the whole time he was on the fence. So he got in the car. He's sleeping a good chunk of the time, and eventually he wakes up, and we're driving through. We're crossing from the Texas Panhandle into northeast New Mexico. Go through this town with the speed trap called Clayton. When you get to Clayton, that's when you start to get to the edge of the volcanic field, and it just starts looking really beautiful. And then you start to see the little hills. Every single little hill, every single little butte is a volcano, and an extinct volcano, or I don't think any of them are dormant. I think they're all extinct. And eventually you get to this one volcano that's the biggest of the bunch. I think it's called Sierra Grande or Sierra Madre. I think it's Sierra Grande. But this one big shield volcano is the biggest of them all. And on the other side of that volcano, so the highway actually goes around the edge of Sierra, I think it's Sierra Grande, Sierra something. And as you're coming around the edge of the biggest volcano, this big dome shield volcano, Capullin pops into view. And I'm like, okay, we're really close. We're getting up to town. There's just this one little town, town of Capulan. We get to town, and there's one road going south out of town, and we're on this little gravel road for a while. It's because you have to go a little bit slower on these gravel roads, especially if depending on the gravel. They can, anyway. And there it is, like 6 to 9 miles south of town's this little cemetery. I'm like, that's it. And it is just weeds everywhere. There were a few little headstones, but most of the graves had like a brick or like a stick with like a pie tin with stuff punched into it.
Oh wow, yeah.
Like some of the graves were literally just like a rock or something, just saying, there's somebody here, but no information. And he had a list of people of sites to go find these people and put these little packets. So we got out of the car and let me just say that the cemetery is just in the most beautiful location. You're surrounded by these like fields of tall grass, just wild prairie, and probably a lot of it's ranch land, and you're just surrounded by these really cool looking extinct volcanoes. I love Capulan, but the view from that cemetery is just like somebody knew that was just the perfect place to put their loved ones, And so we get into the cemetery and we're going around from site to site, from grave site to grave site, and the weeds are tall and most of the cemetery, and we're looking for the graves, and we started finding the ones on the list, and we ended up finding every single one on the list, and we found the woman's aunt, and we found the tin box right there where she said it would be, right in front of the headstone, and it had her name on it, and we didn't open it. We didn't open the box, but we're like, what's in here? Like,
yeah,
what could possibly
be
in
how
this
could you
thing?
not wonder, being sent on a mission for a mysterious object, or whatever, or objects or whatever, how can you not help but wonder what is so important?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, but apparently that box, according to this woman, that box has been sitting in that cemetery for quite a few years. I'm trying to remember how many years it had been, but it had been a long time. Like I'm thinking 10 plus years, and it's still sitting there. And that in that particular area too, what's interesting is that area gets beaten down by some insane weather. Some really tornadoes go through the region all the time, monstrous softball, baseball size hail, snowstorms, huge windstorms, wildfires. That box is still just sitting there, undisturbed. Anybody could have taken it. Any one of her family members, some of the ones that are that want to do harm to her from her husband's side of the family, could have taken that box. No one did.
Wow. So you get the box, you take it back.
So we get the box, and we then we go to the Capulan volcano, which was our original destination to begin with before this woman approached my friend. And then we eventually go up the Great Sand Dunes, and this is actually even though he had lived in Oklahoma since 1999, he had never gone that far west. So this was all new to him, going into the mountains and stuff. So that was just a magical day for him, period, without this strange adventure with this box.
For sure.
So for me, it was really a crazy thing. And I mean, I can't explain it, but I know, I believe everything he said about this woman coming up, and he was terrified, doing this. I was talking him into doing this.
Yeah.
So we got to do this. This is really cool. And so we had this box, and we were almost treating it like the Indiana Jones Ark of the Covenant, in the back of the car, where it was in the trunk area. And we're just every time we approach the trunk area, we're careful not to touch the box. We're like, what's going on here? You know, I'm afraid, like, there's gonna be like scorch marks or something around my vehicle.
Yeah. God, I wonder. Oh man, that would be so many questions. And it's also this thing that is so interesting. Driving over here, or was it this morning? Or I think it was this morning. I was just, for some reason, I was remembering. Like, imagine, I was remembering the first time I drove through the Rocky Mountains and just how astounding it was. And thinking to myself, keep that in mind for when someone you might be with or whatever has never been through there, and they may be with you when it's happening. And I'm just like, and I just remember having this feeling of being in a car and driving through and just being like, whoa, like it was life-changing. It was truly, truly life-changing for me as far as my perspectives about loving, being in love with mountains and just understanding what mountains were now and understanding the call to the mountains and, Valhalla is at the top, above the mountain and, and it speaks to that finding high ground, right? Which translates into heaven is up. There's something about the majesty, the sheer enormity of these things, and especially like volcanoes and the destructive power that they hold within inside them, but also being so beautiful as these great allegories for, or metaphors for like, the human creature, even like we can be so beautiful, but we also have this immense power inside of us that can be destructive, right?
Oh yeah.
But then there's also this unexplainable nature to this story that your friend who is closed off to this stuff, or like
tries to be
actively avoids. He tries to actively avoid, this magical existence of ghosts and other things. There's no explanation for me outside of psychic intuition and just someone being really tapped into that for this. I don't understand by normal measurements, right? And we're talking about measurements a lot here today. And you just have to throw some of that out. I think we just have to throw like standard scientific measurement out the window when it comes to trying to understand how did she know that this was going to happen, and she would have this opportunity to approach your friend and be like, hey, are you going to Capulan? Almost as if, hey, I know you're going to Capulan. Here's some things I have prepared for your journey.
Yes. Yes.
But I'm not going to freak you out too much, so I'm going to ask you if you're going. Right?
Yeah.
Like, almost like a parent looking at a kid who's like clearly full, like, oh, are you finished eating? It's like, clearly they're finished eating. They're about ready to throw up.
Yeah.
It's just really, really funny. And I love when it happens to people who are actively trying to avoid it.
Yeah.
I do love that.
So he definitely, he attracts things to him and he doesn't want to.
It's a negative manifester.
Yeah.
And, because so negatively, energetically trying to avoid something, the universe is just like, he keeps talking about this stuff. Or he's got this energy about this stuff. I better send it to him because the universe isn't in the business of ascribing good or bad to things.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, well, that's the energy of this thing. Let's give it to him. He clearly wants it.
He's focused on it.
He's very focused on it.
He is so very focused on it.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
We've already gone too long.
Oh, okay.
This has been great. We're going to have to do some more chats because we didn't even get into, like, I wanted to, potentially talk about the some of the other bizarre things that have occurred on the road and all this other stuff, and the potential overlapping of severe weather events that have caused like great tragedies in certain regions, and the connectivity to paranormal activity. But we can talk about that another time. Simon, this has been great. I think we need to plug your Instagram, because if you're up for that.
Sure.
Because there's, the photos and stuff on there. If you want to see the front lines of extreme weather and all this, it's really wild stuff. for someone like me who is like, I hear that, on the first, the first Monday of every month at noon, they test the siren.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a bathtub just because when I was a kid, my mom's like, get in the bathtub. You know what I mean? I am not, maybe it's something I should probably maybe try to do at some point just to confront it. But I'm like, this is not my bag. Right. So what's that Instagram handle?
Oh, I'm not sure what my Instagram is.
It's, I've got it. I can pull it up.
If you want to plug my YouTube too, that'd be great.
Oh yeah, of course. Or what's the YouTube?
YouTube is Stormgasm.
Yeah, and I think the Instagasm is this. So Stormgasm.
Stormgasm's my YouTube.
On YouTube, so you can watch videos of, actively being out there.
Yeah.
And footage that you've caught out on the the front lines of the storms. The Instagram is Earth_Stormgasm. You can get probably not even the tip of the iceberg that you can get on YouTube on the Instagram. So yeah, that's great, and I'll put that in the show notes for people and link it so people can easily just click on over and get to the YouTube. We didn't even talk about what happened at the campfire with Kim. I got to talk to her about that.
Yeah.
Because that was our buddy sent me the audio because he was recording on his phone audio at that time. I don't think I was anymore when that happened. Which was wild. That was a wild moment. But yeah, so I'm gonna have to set up another day here real soon where I sit down with Kim maybe at the same table. This has been great, dude. Thanks for doing it.
Sure thing.
Yeah, and more to come in the future, I'm sure. You can go to ryansingercomedy.com/tour. You can see where I'm going to be doing stand-up comedy. I'll be in San Francisco on September 19th. I think I'm in Sacramento the 20th, 21st, and then Santa Cruz the 22nd. Before that, I'm in on September... I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, September 6th. Then I'm in Asheville right after that on Friday night. And then I'm in Charlotte at the Charlotte Comedy Festival on the 10th and 11th. So I hope to see you there at some shows. And some more great interviews coming up. And, I hope to see you there at a live show. If not, I'll see you at the watering hole on the astral plane. Dude, this was great.